The cafe was alive with the
Just
clatter
tell
of
me.
porcelain and the murmur of half-heard conversations. But
Is it
all I could
him?
feel was the cold press of my wedding ring against my finger, like a shackle I hadn't noticed until now. My wife, Elise, sat across from me, her eyes darting to the window, her smile a brittle mask that cracked with every forced laugh. She was radiant in the late afternoon light, her auburn hair catching the sun like a halo, but there was something off. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking too loudly against the cup. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, just the weight of a long day. But deep down, a quiet dread coiled in my chest, whispering that something was wrong. We'd been coming to this cafe for years. Our little rituals shared silences and stolen glances, but today the air felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. I tried to focus on the menu, the familiar cursive promising comfort in its predictability, but my gaze kept slipping to her phone, face down on the table, its silence louder than the chatter around us. She hadn't touched it in 20 minutes, which was unlike her. She was always checking it, laughing at some meme or texting her sister. I asked her about her day, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. "Oh, she said, her tone light but her eyes avoiding mine. Just the usual chaos at work. Her laugh was a sharp note, too high, too quick. I wanted to believe her. I always had. Elise was my anchor, the one who'd held my hand through job losses and late-night doubts. Her warmth a constant in a world that felt unsteady. But lately, there were cracks, small things I brushed off. Her late nights at the office, her sudden need for space, the way she flinched when I reached for her in the dark. I told myself it was stress, that her new promotion was eating up her energy. But the truth was a splinter under my skin, impossible to ignore. She was pulling away, and I didn't know why. The cafe door chimed, and a man walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, with a confidence that seemed to suck the air from a room. He wore a tailored blazer, his dark hair swept back, and his eyes scanned the crowd before landing on Elise. Her posture stiffened just for a moment, before she relaxed into her chair, her smile tightening. My stomach twisted. I knew him, not by name, but by the way her face softened when she looked at him, the way her fingers brushed her hair behind her ear, a gesture she hadn't made for me in months. Friend from work. I asked, keeping my voice casual, though my pulse hammered my ears. She nodded, too quickly, her eyes flicking to man before returning to her coffee. Yeah, just someone from the office. You know how it is. Her words were flimsy, a threadbare excuse I could see through but didn't want to pull apart. Not yet. I forced a smile, my jaw tight, and sipped my coffee, the bitterness coating my tongue. The man didn't sit. He stood by the counter, ordering a drink, but his presence lingered like a storm cloud. I watched Elise in the corner of my eye, noting how she shifted in her seat, how her fingers twitched toward her phone, but stopped short. The silence between us grew heavier, the clink of her spoon now a metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. I wanted to ask her outright, who is he? What's going on? But the words caught in my throat, choked by the fear of what her answer might be. Instead, I reached for her hand across the table, desperate for the familiar warmth of her skin. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before lacing her fingers with mine. You okay? I asked, my voice softer now, searching her face for the woman I'd married. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw it, guilt, raw and unguarded, flickering like a candle in a draft. I'm fine, she said, but her voice cracked, and she pulled her hand away to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear again. The cafe felt smaller now, the walls closing in as the truth clawed its way to the surface. I remembered the late-night text she dismissed as work stuff, the perfume I didn't recognize on her coat, the way she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring to avoid scratching it. Each memory was a puzzle piece, and I was starting to see the picture they formed. My chest ached, not with anger but with a hollow, aching sadness that made it hard to breathe. Elise, I said, my voice low, if something's wrong, you can tell me. It was a plea, not a demand, and I hated how vulnerable it made me feel. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might crack, might let the truth spill out like wine on a white tablecloth. But then she laughed, a sound so forced it cut to the noise of the cafe. "You're so paranoid," she said, reaching for her phone and flipping it over, as if to prove a point. The screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse of notification. A name, Mark, followed by a string of messages I couldn't read. My blood ran cold. The man at the counter turned, his drink in hand, and our eyes met. There was no mistaking it now. The recognition in his gaze, the slight smirk that tugged at his lips. He knew me, or at least knew of me, and that knowledge was a blade twisting in my gut. Elise followed my gaze, and her face paled. "I need some air," she said abruptly, standing so fast her chair scraped against the floor. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door, her steps hurried, almost frantic. I followed, my heart pounding, the cafe blurring into a haze of faces and noise. Outside, the street was alive with the hum of traffic and the sharp bite of autumn air. Elise stood by the curb, her back to me, her shoulders trembling. "Elise!" I called, my voice breaking. She turned, and her eyes were wet, her mascara smudged. "I didn't want to happen like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the city's pulse. "Like what?" I demanded, stepping closer, my hands clenched at my sides. "What's happening, Elise?" "Who is he?" The questions poured out, each one sharper than the last, fueled by months of doubt and denial. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice choking. "I didn't mean to. I love you, but what?" I shouted, drawing stares from passers-by. The world felt unsteady, like the ground was slipping beneath my feet. She looked away, her silence louder than any confession. And then I saw him again, Mark, stepping out of the cafe, his eyes locked on us. He didn't approach, but he didn't need to. His presence was enough, a confirmation of every fear I tried to bury. "I can't do this anymore," Elise said, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I could, but I can't." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the sting of her words cutting deeper than I'd thought possible. "It's over," she said, and the finality of it hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, watching as she walked toward Mark, her steps slow but deliberate, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I should have screamed, should have chased her, demanded answers. But all I could do was smile, a brittle, broken thing that felt like a lie. "To new beginnings," I said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, raising an imaginary glass. A few strangers chuckled, oblivious to the wreckage inside me. Elise glanced back, her face a mix of guilt and relief, before she disappeared into the city with him. I stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, my smile fading as the truth settled in. She'd staged this moment, this public unraveling, to free herself, and I'd played my part, smiling through betrayal, inviting the world to celebrate my heartbreak.